Om Vedanta Siddhanta Niruktiresha Brahmaiva Jivaham Sakalam Jagadcha Akanda Rupa Stitir Eva Moksho Brahma Vitye Shutayaha Pramanam Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. It is the apt and final conclusion of the Vedanta that all is Brahman. Time, space, living beings in the world. Living in constant recognition of this fact is what is called enlightenment. Brahman is pure and perfect, and one without a second. And the revealed scriptures are the sure and certain proof of this fact. Om, peace, peace, peace. May Brahman protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking process. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om, peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us. May peace be unto all. Om Hari Om Hari Om Hari Om Tat Sat. We are all gathered here today for Satsang, and opening with the Sanskrit chants, as is our usual tradition, puts ourselves in mind of that divine reality in two aspects. Brahman and Shakti, or that formless divine reality which is infinite, immortal, and beyond time, space, and causality. And that divine Shakti power, which is one and the same with it. Sri Ramakrishna used to say that it's like the case of a snake wriggling across the floor. Sometimes it's still, and other times it breaks into motion. But it's still the same snake in those two aspects. So in that way, we think about Brahman and Shakti as being one and the same, like fire in its heat, water in its wetness. And we can think about it philosophically as being Nirguna and Saguna. That is, basically, the gunas here means different attributes. Nirguna would be, of course, without attributes, therefore beyond the mind, senses, and objects relationship. And the Saguna Brahman would be that which we're more familiar with. All the attributes of nature, for instance, and the different characteristics. The worlds, although many people only count one world these days, but the external world plus the internal worlds as well, as we come to know about them in Vedanta studies. We can also think about this as being the formed and formless, as Sri Ramakrishna was so well known for saying that God is with form, endowed with form, but it also exists beyond form as well. Sometimes he would even say that it's beyond both form and formlessness, to give us that idea of something that's purely transcendent, and which the sages and saints call our true nature, or Atman is the word we have for it here in Vedanta. So those teachings are on our minds. All we have to do is think of a few precious words. In our tradition, basically those are in Sanskrit, but we have ready and applicable definitions for them that cause our minds to think, even in English, about the powerful nature of everything around us. That, as I started out chanting, we find out that Brahman is in everything, in all things, but it's never a thing in itself. It transcends them all, or acts as their backdrop. the underlying substratum, as Meister Eckhart called it. Or the nirvana of Buddhism, the samadhi of Vedanta, the asampragyata of yoga, the beatific vision of some Christian mystics, if you will. But there's where sometimes English can be a little misleading, because that absolute Brahman is not a vision. It's not an imagination, nor is it a thought, nor is it encaptured or capsulated in a word. It's transcendent of all of those. So in Vedanta, we have that non-dual turn of things and events where most people have a practice of meditation. But there can be a kind of meditation that can go on for months and even years, that all one sees is blackness or darkness inside. But and that's a kind of formlessness. Maybe that's why some beings have come to connect Brahman with a void or with something empty. That emptiness is a word sometimes used in philosophy. But we know that beyond that state of formlessness, which is just an emptiness, there's that fullness, which Vedanta talks about. Purnamadaha, Purnamidam, Purnat Purnamadakshate, Purnasya Purnamadaiva, Purnameva Vishishyate. All that repetition of that word is indicative of fullness, of completeness or wholeness. So we have to connect that to this non-dual Brahman and be able to place our minds upon it in meditation. At some point of time, then we begin to stop thinking so much. So I always used to quip, your parents tell you, get busy and start thinking. And then you grow up and your meditation master tells you, stop thinking so much. So they can't make up their mind, it seems. So maybe the point is that we do both, that we know that Brahman without form is beyond conceptualization, beyond form, and that we can only get to it and merge in it if we transcend time, space, and causality. But the intellectual frame of reference that the Western society is built upon is always focusing in very deeply and specifically on those very things. And so they cause us to think that time, space, and causality are real. But they disappear in deep sleep, and they disappear at death, and they disappear in that highest state called samadhi. And so they ask us to look upon that, even maybe to feign or assume death. Vivekananda used to say that, said, in the West, you've been taught that death is a morbid thing and you shouldn't think about it or talk about it, sort of sweep it under the carpet kind of thing. But in the East, we're taught that death is an illusion. So Ram Prasad sings in his songs, I've received a command from the Divine Mother of the universe that death must die. So I remember my teacher talking about that, Swami Sheshananda. I'm put in mind of him more and more the last couple of days because I'm transcribing one of his lectures into our non-dual journal, in which he titled it God as Mother. So he's very much with me when I think about him, as is the case in Vedanta with everything we do. If we place our minds upon it, then we have a sort of concourse with it, a deep contemplation and meditation on it. And that's more to the point of the focus that we want out of our lives. Because fragmented mind, of course, is not the kind of mind we want to assume. It has to be at least one-pointed until such a time as that it can become nirvritti, free of vibrations, free of thought vibrations, that is, Father of Yoga says. And so we're going to have to practice those exercises that grant us that. That is, without self-control, you can never get self-realization. And without self-realization, you can't become a jivan mukta. That is a living, liberated soul, which is the purpose of life. And in the West, it seems we have a very hard time producing those jivan muktas, or those living, liberated souls. Seems like we're always bound to forms, to time, things that happen in time and space, and to karma, cause and effect, which comes back on us all the time. So we look to countries in the East, particularly India, that have produced so many of these illumined souls, not just one Jesus or one saint or a handful of saints, but by the thousands. You see them getting this enlightenment that takes them beyond the intellectual frame of reference into that which is purely spiritual, which is beyond religion and beyond philosophy, and which probably you'll need to take religion and philosophy like two wings of a bird and blend them together as they did, and maybe be able to have recourse to 5 or 6 different paths instead of just one, like they did. And therefore, pretty soon you're put in mind of a high ideal that you can actually attain, and which is supported by your practice, and which is fortified by your worship. So therefore, as we've been talking about in the last 3 Sundays of classes, Sunday classes, that would be that beautiful triputti, or triple teaching of Vedanta, Yoga, and Tantra, where you have the great minds, Vedanta, and you have the energy for practice, Yoga, and you have the great heart, the love of the Lord and the Divine Mother of the Universe in Tantra. So in order to thin out the world bewitching Maya, the other day I had a slip of tongue, I called it the world we bitching Maya, because we bitch about it all the time, but it's the world bewitching Maya. And in order to thin that out, we're going to need recourse to these various darshanas. They're called passive clear seeing, not just one, but we avail ourselves of many. And that way you can become a jack of all trades and a master of none in the early stages of your practice. And then you'll specify and you'll specialize. That's what the Guru has done, become a specialist. And heard that said by my teacher yesterday on the tape I was transcribing. I call Guru a specialist. So he said, because that being has focused upon Divine Mother and her wisdom, and it's decided that that's the solution for everything. I remember our own founder, Lex Hickson, and myself talking about that in our younger days, when he was a student of Swami Nikhilananda and I was a student of Swami Sheshananda, and came together after that and started talking about the great solution of all things being this Dharma, or this ancient divine wisdom. As I call that the Adi Daiva Vidya. Adi means original. You can't get any purer or any higher in the order of things than Adi. It's the original Daiva, the original divine, because Daiva means divine. Vidya means wisdom. So that original divine wisdom is there, deep in the soil of India. And therefore, so many souls, and souls like Lord Buddha, for instance, have come out of that soil. And with their different divine perspectives and the conclusions, like we just chanted, the siddhanta that they've come to by living many lifetimes in spiritual self-effort. And then they come to this great conclusion. Asaja maya malamanta anutana malaganta Mala manta kosajam pamado rakato mala, Buddha used to say. Basically, slothfulness, laziness is the rest of all things. When that rest gets into the monastery, it's called lack of recitation of scriptures. When that rest gets into households, it's called lack of self-effort. So you must be like a watchman at the gates of a great city, always on vigil. So the Lord Buddha was saying things like that when he was alive, warning us against this slothfulness that comes upon us, this negligence that creeps upon us when we forget to do our spiritual practice, even on just a little bit every day is good. Body postures, asanas, pranayama, they can only go so far. But if you take that mantra and go deep with it, then you can accomplish so much along the lines of both wisdom and devotion. Because you're going straight to the heart, to the word, as it's been called by great seers in different traditions. The word is very powerful. So maybe some of the things I've been saying here this morning that are on my mind have been on your mind as well over the past week since we've seen each other. And you can come forth with them and sort them out and in your minds and speak them out through your lips. Share them with the Sangha, who can begin so that I don't have to keep thinking of things to say.
Namaste, Babaji. Namaste all.
Sounds like Imre. Namaste.
I would like to ask again a basic question. It's vritti, how we should understand vritti. Actually, I was wondering whether it's cyclic, or rather it's like a wave or ripple. As a metaphor, is it like a ripple, or is it rather like a cyclic motion returning all the time? Yes, that would be my first. And then the samskara, and is there how the samskaras are generated, and how vrittis and samskaras related, or how they are resolved on the other side or from the other perspective.
Yes, well, your first question, there's a lot of talk in both physics and in spiritual life about waves. And I remember my teacher's own take on the waves is that they were, like Father of Yoga said, these vrittis, or waves of thought that come upon us, give rise to everything else. So that's why the mind is the hub of everything in the three worlds, or the seven chakras, or the seven lokas, however you look at that. So when the mind starts vibrating, then everything comes forth, like when you wake up. And when you go to sleep, it stops vibrating, then everything disappears for you back into this deep sleep, they call it, or shushupti in Sanskrit. You have jagrat, waking, you have swapna, dreaming, and then you have shushupti, deep sleep state. So the mind is this hub, or this factory of thought, if you will, and sometimes it shuts down and somebody throws a switch and it all comes back again, and out of thought come worlds and objects and activities and creatures, denizens of all the worlds. And in that way, then it's like a wave. See, that's as the Buddhists say, constantly rising and falling. And Buddhists like Nagarjuna and our Gaudapada in Vedanta have both concurred on the fact, too, that this is naturally rising from a greater mind. up they come and then down they fall. And then pretty soon, the experienced sadhaka, or the adept spiritual being, or the master or the adept, begins to withdraw themselves from that rising and falling. And they see that it just goes on and on forever like that, but they can extricate themselves from it. That ideally, that's your meditation, but I don't think many people think of it that way. Meditation can be on a form, as we were saying earlier. So you have your ishtam, like Jesus or Buddha or Ramakrishna, Krishna, and so forth. And so you're looking at the biggest of all waves there, aren't you? That's the tidal wave that came on the ocean of consciousness at one time. And it too merges back into the ocean like an iceberg. But you can also meditate on the cessation of all motion, the cessation of all thought. And that's this formless reality that the seers tend to put their minds upon. Most of them say that that's the ultimate goal. It's like even in more dualistically oriented religions, it's still the Father through which you get to through the Son. So they all have an eye on that, although many don't focus on it, because the natural tendency is to play in the fields of the Lord. That's that Maya we're talking about. Or if it's conscious, it's called Lila. That play in the fields of the Lord can become more conscious, and you can have a greater purpose behind it, like to help, have compassion for suffering. That's where you would put together great teachings out of Christianity and Buddhism and come up with the same conclusions. But it's good to know about these waves in consciousness, whether they be huge waves or whether they be the smaller waves. And in view of the smaller wave, that's what you're calling cyclic, you see. Those, unfortunately, tend to circulate. They revolve. So you have teachers like Buddha coming forth and saying, well, that's samsara. And that rising and falling, that should be just something that you think about as natural, like, oh, that's called non-origination. It doesn't come from a source, it doesn't return from the source, it just happens. And we'll just stand back and watch it. So the witness gets sucked into the idea that those waves rising and falling have something real to them when they're just rising and falling, that's all. So that's where the soul begins to concentrate on, fall into samsara, and it gets caught in habitual rounds of birth and death, thinking them to be real, and thinking time, space, and causality, karma, to be real as well. So they lose that witness standpoint. So that would be our theory of waves. If you're talking about quantum physics and all that, and what they're going through right now to try and realize the same reality, is our theory of waves would be based upon samsara and the sensation of all vibrations. And that's the downside and the stumbling block that we have in the West with our scientists, with our philosophers. Nobody can get over this fact that somehow this vibration going on out there is non-actual. They all think it to be actual, it's real, and it's the only thing. And so the result of that is you come down to one world, which is physical, one way of thinking, which is your own narrow religion. And you forget this boundless ocean of pure conscious awareness, which is timeless, deathless, immortal, and eternal. And your connection to it being by way of identity. Instead, they become identified with these little waves that are rising and falling all the time, like your body is a little wave. Vivekananda, if you read his lectures on, say, Maya, a statement of fact is a good one. He'll begin to inform you about the way India has been looking at these whales, no, that's a wave, waves in rounds and whirlpools and eddies and tides. I mean, he'll take the metaphor of an ocean or of space with its movement, and he'll give you a really good idea of this way in which all these waves have come out of you, and you should be the witness of them. It's sort of like a mother gives birth to children and then she watches them grow and does everything for them, but she's not the child, actually. She's her own self. So that witness consciousness called Sakshi Buddham is very important in Vedanta. It means that, and it would solve the problem of getting attached to phenomena and therefore becoming shobha, too emotional. You want to be ashobha, non-emotional, like the Zen Buddhists. They like that. They like that very much. And just watch the rising and falling of things and see that in the end, that's all it is. There's no residue left over for you. See that was my Swami, my Guru's name, Swami Shesha Nanda. So Shesha is like something left over at the end of a cosmic cycle. It's the name of a great serpent, actually, too. But Ashesha means I don't have anything left over after I've lived. I don't have any baggage to carry with me. I'm not going to heaven, because heaven is just this world at a different level, and hell is on the other side. So I want to get over all transmigration and get beyond the heaven aspiring senses and be God aspiring, be able to dissolve myself into the ocean of awareness when the hailstone is done falling through the skies. Just dissolve itself in that ocean of awareness. And then it realizes that it's the whole ocean, and it's the whole skies, and it's the clouds, and it's the crystallization process, and it's the dissolution process too. And it's all being operated from that central point of that word, which is problematic to some philosophers, the self. Let's see, we call it the great self. May we make an offering to the small self and to the great self, the Upanishads tell us. And may we always revere the Lord and Mother of all sacrifices. So that is about waves, big and small. And then, of course, that giant tidal wave that comes every once in a while in the form of, most recently, our own guru, our own Parama Guru, our own Parapada Guru, Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. That was the big wave that broke upon the shores of Burloka, or this physical earth. And it'll take a while to pick up the pieces. You know, when a tidal wave hits you short, it stirs things all over. So when some great spiritual force like that hits the borders of relativity, which is called physical universe, then there'll be a lot of things to reassess. And in the subtlemost way, that'll be our spiritual perspectives. What has now happened to us? What has happened to me as a result of that? And if I manage to explore the woods of the world and find a trail that has light on it, then I should walk that trail. And that's the God blog I sent you late last night. Sorry for the fifth one being so late, but that's when Sri Ramakrishna said, a tiger devours everything on its path. So people who are ignorant, they'll run away from that path because they don't want to meet the tiger. But those beings that want everything stripped off of them so that they can walk the path to the end, they're looking for that tiger of truth. And they're going to offer themselves to it and stand in the way, walk that trail. The rest will run for cover of the dense foliage of the trees where darkness is always more comfortable. Swarupan Yatabhava, that means I'm running away from my true self all the time. I can't stop and face off with Maya and give it up. Let go thy hold. It becomes Swarupa Pratista, steady in knowledge that I am the self, but I am the self in all. All heavens and earths and hells, all hopes and fears, I do hereby renounce. And take your stance in your true self, the Paramatman. So waves, as Imre is talking about, there's one way of looking at waves in actually three different aspects. The recurring waves that are cyclic, and then the wave that is powerful, and then the ocean itself, out of which all of this rises, and that one can be the witness of, with just a little bit of that self-effort. Strange that in a world like this, the most precious thing called spirituality is the hardest thing to attain. Should be the simplest and most natural, and that's what Sri Ramakrishna showed us. But he also had difficulty. Where was his difficulty? Letting go of the form of the mother. Totapari finally came to him. I told him, you seem like a very good student. Let me teach you the Advaita, non-duality. And he said, I'll have to ask my teacher. So he ran to his tantric teacher, Bhairavi Brahmani. And she said, no, if you practice Advaita, you'll become dry. You'll be a dry old monk. I won't allow you. But he didn't listen to her in that instance. He went back to Totapari, and Totapari gave him the exercises through which he could pierce through all forms and all names. And so he took the sword of discrimination, he cut through the form of the Divine Mother and had the highest realization, which is beyond description. We call it samadhi or nirvana or satori or asampragata. And then he came back to his blissful form of the Divine Mother smiling at him. And so he had realized this divine reality as Brahman and Shakti both, not just one. But he realized that these two were also just one. And so he cut through the cosmic Maya, through the cosmic subterfuge of this spectacle of name and form, time and space, at so many dimensions, with the sword of wisdom, and became a realized soul, illumined soul, or realized his innate divine nature. And that wave broke upon our shores of relativity. Sharada Ramakrishna Name Bande Keche Rebai, beautiful song in Bengali. And names of Sharada and Ramakrishna are coming. Can't you hear that great sound? So it seems you say the mantra with their name in it. Can't you just feel the boundaries of time and space falling away, dissolving, leaving you as you are, without those false superimpositions? You are the great light. I and my Father are one. Aham Brahmasmi. I am Brahman. Tattvamasi, that thou art. Just didn't take but a few words to transport the ancient rishis into that natural samadhi. Who else has something to add to our satsang now that we've taken up the wave theory? Yes, Anahata, hi. Aloha.
Hello. Namaste, Babaji, and all. Actually, it's on the same subject. I'm in this beach town in Mexico and walk the beach a lot, and I've contemplated the wave action on the beach, and I've thought of it as the waves being thoughts breaking onto the shore of conscious awareness. You know, the beach is conscious awareness and the waves are thoughts. And that, you know, I can either be really, really focused on each wave and is that a big one or a small one, or what shape is it and what action will it have? I can focus on those waves breaking on the shore. Or if I lift my eyes a little higher and just focus on the horizon where the ocean meets the sky, it's absolutely still out there. And I think of it as sort of like a metaphor of what you're speaking of. I just wondered, does that make sense as a metaphor of shifting from focus on thoughts, or even just from being in a space of, yes, the waves are there. I know they're there, but I'm looking beyond the waves.
Very definitely. Those are great metaphors. The sun, the ocean, space. In terms of the ocean, I remember my teacher used to say that if you remain on the surface of the ocean, you get tossed by its waves all the time. But if you dive deep, deep, deep under the surface, then you realize peace. The peace that passes all understanding is there, down deep in the ocean of awareness.
Mm-hmm.
If you make your way towards the island or towards shores, then you'll find these waves tend to become more and more manifest. So that's individuality. You know, the ocean is all one homogeneous mass of conscious awareness in that metaphor. But when it comes to the edges of its of where relativity or where dream life is going on, is how we would probably call it in Tantra, then there's a mass collective mental dream going on that causes the uprising of land, earth in the midst of all. Both the Rig Veda and the Bible talk, Old Testament and New Testament talk about in the beginning how there was this darkness.
Right.
So then, this ocean of consciousness breaks into waves when it's close to that dream life of relativity. The waves are all individual egos that come out of this one homogeneous mass of consciousness. They break themselves into separate beings and break upon the shores of relativity, dream their dream of life there, and then just disappear back into formlessness.
Mm-hmm.
So all things are doing that. It's some things are just taking longer than others. Assumption of form and assumption of name and form has always been one of the ways in which India has looked at that. Nama Rupa Vihaya. It's I'm now taking on a form. I'm going to give myself a name, and then time and space must be there so that I can manifest a body and sport there. And dream this finite dream, and then return to the infinite. I think the difference between Maya and Leela is important there. He said, if the dream is conscious, the more, or put it this way, the more conscious the dream becomes, the less binding it is to the soul. So they asked Swami Vivekananda that, should a man be reborn? And he said, I certainly hope he will not until he can do so in full consciousness. So he wasn't down at all with the idea of being born, suffering, being bound, creating more karma, but rather just make an appearance, not identify with name and form, but just associate with it. Sort of like checking out the dreams of others. If you're a great dreamer, or if you've transcended all dreams, then you can take on a wave, take on a form in the ocean, and then see what other waves are about, and maybe convince them that they're the ocean. That's what he was trying to do, to point us back to our boundless nature. A man has come to me from a land that never sleeps. Now all my dreams have become radiant meditations. And that's one of the songs of India that my teacher used to like very much. And he would recite that once in a while to us. So coming from a land that never sleeps is beyond that dream. It's a constant awakeness.
Right.
What our founder called the insomnia of yoga. So that you're always in that land of Divine Mother. The sun of wisdom never rises and sets. It's always shining, like the third eye. It's always open, always shining, and always free of impositions and modifications and sublations and appearances. It burns through all the clouds of ignorance and deception, and dispels the gloom of death, fear, doubt, and darkness, as he used to say. So identifying with the ocean or with the sun has been done by thousands of people as a meditation that one can take up. It's called an alambana in yoga. You take something as your foundation to meditate upon. And the best things, of course, are the heart of a saint or the heart of a seer. If you can meditate upon a great soul, that's that huge wave we just talked about. Short of that, you take things that are great in nature. If you can't understand the great mind yet, which would be the next best things, the cosmic mind of God, the Mahat, they call that. Then after that, then the meditations can become more and more manageable based upon things that you take up here in nature that are beautiful and inspiring. Father of Yoga has 7 ways to master your consciousness that way. And I just mentioned 3 of those right there. One of them is that the yogi just takes anything that's most pleasing and meditates on it. So that's probably one of the most basic things, is just set yourself down and concentrate on the most pleasing thing to you at that time, because it gets rid of the waves of negativity, the klista vrittis. The klista vrittis are negative thoughts, so you want those to go, and so that the next morning you don't get up with them again, or they don't recur on you next week or next lifetime. So you replace the klista vrittis with the aklista vrittis, the positive ones. So in the 7 ways of mastering the human mind, Father of Yoga tells us that set yourself down and work on on getting rid of the klista vrittis by the aklista vrittis. Water the flowers, not the weeds. And master that kind of meditation first. And then it would be more and more easy for you day to day to take up some of the other ones. That's pratika, or would be that you take an object, and meditate on that. Like Krishna says, a candle in a windless place.
Mm-hmm.
Or a tiny stone obelisk, or like a tiny Buddha, or a baby Ram, a baby Krishna.
Mm-hmm.
And it focuses your mind down on one thing, which is a gateway, causes a gateway to open into formlessness. You get to the formless through the form, but not by taking the form to be real, because most people are doing that. You have to see through the form. That's the stumbling block, that you can't get through the infinite through the finite. That is, by keeping the finite as an ideal, you have to transcend it. That's a subtle stumbling block that so many people are tripping on. It's all unreal. It's all changing. It's all vibrating. It's all waves. But you have to find the source. So you're going to have to quell the vibrations, see through the forms. But they want to take these with them, so much. They grab onto them, cling to them. And that's why life becomes the way it is on Earth right now. That's selfish clinging to things that are not real, that are pain-producing. So as individuals, we take all these negative vibrations that can rise around us every day, and we do away with them, neutralize them, attenuate them. Dissolve them eventually. From impure mind to pure mind to no mind. Because if there's no mind, there's no matter. And if there's no matter, well, never mind. So matter is the problem. And that matter is what's the matter with all of us. If we could take it and leave it, like Patanjali says, just move amongst the objects of the senses without attachment, like the yogi or yogini does, then we're fine. We can be here, and we can occupy a body. We can hold an ego position, and be an individual, true individual, and still leave all the nadis and the passageways inward open to our source. But if we clog those up, like eating too much meat or something, you see, with the physical body, then got to go to the doctor for a stint. Well, that's all right. I can just eat unhealthy now because medicine can keep me alive. Mm-hmm. See, it's just I can go to the pill or to the scalpel. That's what people are doing now. So that's not the best way to get out of fear of death, because death comes to all beings. And you're also elongating a life which is not necessarily an illumined life, just doing the same old things over and over again. in rounds. Those waves that we were just talking about will come around, they'll become habitual, cyclic. That's called samsara. So may we live a life which is beneficial to ourselves and all other beings. Certain watch phrases or watch words that we can use to keep ourselves in balance in yoga all the time. Ever awake with the insomnia of yoga. Few minutes left. Is there any more insights, comments, remarks, questions?
Sorry, Babaji, I would like to raise a question here. So can it be that there is a positive samskara, like the seers present this, like say the iconography and so forth, as some kind of support to, or right, this gateway to be able to live for others, and then that's why these wisdom teachings are in this sense preserved all the time to provide this gateway.
Yes, it's a new lamps for old kind of thing for the beginner. They want to trade in these old samskaras for new samskaras, as create everything anew, and go and renovate the mind and its old patterns, its old thinking processes, and make it shine again. For those who are coming to earth with an already illumined mind, those are, of course, very rare souls. For them, they're going to be working their way down and out to try and share some of this light with others. They find out that they are the self in all. And so there should be a way of coming in contact with all beings and revealing this light to them. And so the positive samskaras are very much similar to what we were just talking about with the aklista vrittis. You might say that positive and negative thoughts, klista and aklista vrittis, when you practice that art of yoga chitta vritti nirodha, that is basically you want to practice the art of not thinking anymore. Or, you can put it in another way too, that like the Buddhists and a few others like non-reaction. Because usually there's the sight of a thing, and then there's the thought, and then there's a reaction to it. It's a kind of dynamics of perception that they've watched, but it only becomes clear to people who are tired of their egos. You see, I'm tired of myself. I don't really like myself, and I don't like anyone else either. You see, so do you become a crotchety old man, or do you do something about it? So in spiritual practice, then you look into the source of this dislike, and you find out that it's right there in your very self, in your not self, really, in your ego. And then you can do something about those negative vrittis that are rising up all the time and neutralize them. And at that point, then you would become the owner of a new samskara, and a seller of the old samskara. Well, I gave that one away. I sent that back to the ocean of cosmic ignorance from which it sprang. You see, and now I'm taking on this new samskara. It's like a shiny new pot. It doesn't need polishing right now. So the art of yoga chitta vritti nirodha leads to this this spiritual attainment of positive samskaras, impressions that are that are made into the firmament of reality, rather than old trails and old pathways that we've trodden before, that weave us back into the old ways of thinking. We have that what that saying, what is it? It's a tangled web we weave. So, if we say that to a Vedantist, they're thinking right away about samskaras and karmas. That's the tangled web we weave. And so to untangle it and get free, strike off thy fetters, bonds that bind thee down. Go in that direction and realize your true divine nature. Then all will be peace, peace, peace. Om Tayu Shantihi Antariksham Shantihi Prativi Shantihi Apaho Shantihi Oshadaya Shantihi Vanashpataya Shantihi Vishvadeva Shantihi Brahma Shantihi Sarvam Shantihi Shantaredi Shantarsoma Shantarevi Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. May peace be unto plants and peace be unto animals. Peace be unto man, peace be unto gods, peace be unto woman and child. Peace be unto waters, fire, air, ether, flowers, herbs. Peace be unto peace be unto peace itself. May this very peace enter into us, permeate us to the very core of our being. Om Shanti, 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 peace, peace, peace.